We're back with another image shot by one of my attendees from our in-person workshops here at Studio Photography Workshops. This is an image from Nigel from one of our beauty workshops. We were doing gels and playing with colour in a beauty kind of posing fashion sort of sense. And as usual with this series, what I'm looking at doing is showing you how I would edit this particular image. What I would do. And I'd love to see Nigel's version as well. I'd love to see what else everyone else does, because I think sometimes it can be really interesting to get a brand new take on an image. When you shoot it, you might have something particular in mind. I know I do. Something exactly like what you're going to do. And I think it would be interesting to see everyone's different opinions and everyone's different take on the image. So let's get started. I haven't planned anything as usual. I haven't looked. I've picked an image from a thumbnail, and that's about it. I like to do this completely raw, excuse the pun, and just show you guys exactly my thought process. As crazy as it might be and as all over the place as it might be, I think it's better that you see the authentic thought process as I'm doing it, rather than here we go, step 1, 2, 3, and just show you one thing. Now this is going to be quite specific because we are working with a blue and a yellow gelled set picture, but the techniques would be applicable to most different coloured sort of gelled pictures. So hopefully this would work for a lot of different people and different sort of shots. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I always do is I start with my composition. I think if I can see and visualize the final sort of crop, I understand what I want to do with that image a bit better. Now, as usual with Nigel's work, the composition is lovely. It always is lovely. For me, this frame is a bit long, which is just that type of camera. So I want to bring the space in a tiny bit here. Now, this kind of crop, I have always called this the bridge crop. I have called it this for the stupid reason that either side of the subject is roughly the same and a little bit on top, so it makes like an archway. So it's kind of a bridge, it's kind of an arch, and it just sort of sits them in quite comfortably rather than having too much space on top. It just sort of frames the subject. I have no idea if that's got an official name, that one particularly. It's just my own little technique, and I think it sort of sits and works for me. But I like that. So I'm going to leave that crop there, just taking off the negative space that I didn't really want. Now, usually I would then start playing with exposures and highlights and shadows, but the feature here is color. So I'm going to go straight to color. We're going to go down to our color mixer, our HSL tab here, and I want to be playing with hue, because blue gels, you can get all different color gels, you can get lots of different types, but the blue gels we were using were quite a dark blue, and we wanted quite a cyan, but the cyan that we had was quite weak. So we wanted to use the dark blue and make that cyan afterwards. So if I go down to my blue tab here, and if I move that either way, you can see how much I can change just the blue elements of the image. And if I go to my yellow, you can see exactly the same on there. Now we've also got the option with Lightroom to grab this little button. I don't know what we call them, but this little button here, click on it and drag my mouse around to sort of see what colors I like. And as you can see, the sliders are moving for me, and it's moving the blue, but it's also slightly affecting the purple because it's found the color. Most people find that easier, find that an easy way to do it. I don't know why, but I like to use the sliders manually. Makes me happier. So if I bring that down to here, I think that's quite nice. I like the cyan. I want to have more of a teal, more of a cyany kind of color, rather than a deep blue. And if I go now to my oranges, I really do want kind of more of a warm tone orange. Then I do want like a yellow. I mean, it was kind of orangey yellow anyway. It was a yellow gel, but I'd rather it have sort of more of a warmer kind of feel, more of a golden kind of feel to it, than be more yellow. So Loving the colours on that. If I go back, you can already see that the most change is really in the blue. It really has just lifted that, and it's actually made her face brighter because you sort of are drawn to that colour a little bit more. Let's play around with that now. So I want to actually tone this yellow bit down a tiny bit, and I want to enhance her face a little bit more. Because we're working with blues and yellows, I can play around with my temperature a little bit more. Now, if I just play with this dial here, you'll see it get warmer. And when I've got that all the way up to, what is that, 50,000, or someone's going to correct me and tell me it's 500,000, whatever it is, it's still actually not miles away from what the image already was. And if I go the other way, it's going to go entirely blue because it was a dominantly blue image. So we can play around here and choose what kind of balance we kind of want with that. But what we can also do is play with our layers. Play with our masks, which have layers. Let's bring our mask up, and I'm going to go with a linear gradient. And I'm going to drag, because we've got yellow one side, blue the other. Yellow we haven't got in the background here, but blue we have. So I'm going to just pull that over. I'm going to go with quite a thin feathering and then pull that over so it's just hitting the blue. I can now use the temperature to just affect this side. And I'm going to just enhance the blue a little bit more, just to really emphasize it. And because I've now got this mask on this side, I can play with my highlights. I can play with the area on the face to just make sure I can see the detail that I want to see. We can up the exposure a little bit if we want to. And we can really play around with making this dramatic. Now, what I'm doing here isn't going to be an exact science for coloured gels, because whatever you use, if you've got a red on the face, purple on the face, they're all different sort of thicknesses, and the light will travel through them differently, and it's going to be slightly different for every single image, which is why I'm not telling you exact measurements, but you can see what I'm doing here. I quite like that. I'm now going to create a new mask, another linear gradient. I'm going to go across to the yellow and play around there. So if I bring that yellow in even more, it's not really affecting the background too much. We've got a slight tinge of green, but if I pull it away a little bit more, it's held in quite well. I actually think that looks better. I think that's actually separated it quite nicely. I think that's looking quite nice. I like that. So we've now got our bluey, yellowy kind of tones. I now want to make sure we're drawn to the face even more. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add one more mask, and it's going to be a radial gradient. And I'm going to start in the middle of the face, draw out. I want way more feathered than that. So it's come in, and I'm going to invert it. And by inverting it, I can now pull my exposure down ever so slightly, and I can also make the exposure cooler. So now what I've done, if I turn this mask on and off, you can just see that we're slightly drawn to the face more, and it's just toned down that exterior area. And I can bring that out if I want to include a bit more. And I think that has just given me a little bit more focus onto that image. I think that looks cool. So overall, I don't think there's going to be anything else I actually want to do in Lightroom. I am actually happy with that, and I want to take that into Photoshop to finish the image. So let's take that over to Photoshop now. Here we are now in Photoshop, and we're going to get started on this image. As usual, I start with cleanup. So I'm going to bring up my patch tool, and I'm going to zoom in and have a look around. Now, Lily's got absolutely fantastic skin. However, with gels, you will find that little bumps, things that are completely normal, might look a little bit more odd. So we might remove tiny little things like this just to make sure the skin looks as clear as it can be. I mean, even things like moles and freckles that are completely normal can look a little bit odd when you've got a colour on them. So we just take them out to get the best aesthetic. But as I said, she's got absolutely great skin. There's a little hair here, so I'm going to take that out. I'm going to scroll around the head, removing the little hairs. Now what I'm doing is I'm just using content aware. I'm selecting it with my patch tool, hitting the delete button, and on content it's got content aware. I'm going to click OK. The reason I'm doing that is I'm right near the edge of the hair, And so I don't want to be dragging and patch tooling because I'm going to get smudges if I do that. So overall, the hair's very neat because it's quite early on in our session when we were still doing the styling quite well. Now, you might be able to see in the background here, there's quite a few little stray hairs. So I'm just going to be dragging them away. And from there, and this section here, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to drag them away, and then I'm going to grab my clone stamp, take from this area here, and just draw into that area, just there. Perfect. Now, still moving around the body. The only other thing that I like to remove or soften is necklines. Especially in a beauty image, anything horizontal cutting across the neck is going to shorten the look of the neck. And it's completely natural. We all have them. You can soften them, you can remove them, you can just leave them there if you want to. It's my own personal preference. As far as I'm concerned, it's not something that we aim to have. It's not something that's there all the time. It's sort of just there when we've been in certain poses. So I can take that line and take that out. And I can do the same with these and just drag them down to remove just in here. And it just sort of elongates the neck a little bit more, cleans that space up. Now we've got other lines around. You can have this from clothing marks, from bra straps. I definitely suggest removing any clothing marks, bra straps and anything like that because that's not natural. It's not there the whole time. I think that's for the best. Okay, so clean up done. I haven't gone in and looked around the eyes, but we can do that separately. Next thing I'm thinking of doing is contour. So I'm going to do this on a grey layer. So I'm going to hit Control Shift and N, or Control Command and N, depending on what you're using. Mode, I'm going to go down to Soft Light, and I want to tick the box for a 50% grey layer, which I've got here. If I turn that off, it's completely grey. And I'm going to now use my dodge and my burn tool for lightening and darkening. Dodge tool is located here, and it is on midtones at 20%. And I'm just going to use the brush size I would if I was applying makeup. So if I was applying makeup to her cheek, I wouldn't use an eyeshadow brush that is tiny. So I'm going to bring that up, and I'm just tapping. I'm not drawing, I'm just tapping at the areas I want to brighten. And I'm following where the light already is. I'm not trying to lighten the shadow. I am just following where the light already hits, just to give me a little bit of control over where that is. And I can now play around here on the collarbone, around, and now we're going to move on to our burn tool, which is located here. Again, midtones 20%. You can adjust that if you feel you need to. If you want to have it more powerful, that is absolutely fine. But I find that 20% is just enough for me to sketch and draw. You can also zoom in as you do this. I highly recommend you do. I've been doing this for a long time, so I kind of know what I'm doing from a distance. But if you want to zoom in and make sure that what you're getting is exact, then do that. So I'm just drawing around the shadows that already exist here. I'm not adding anything, I'm just enhancing. Now let's zoom in and just do the lip and the top of the eye, just in here. And I'm going to go back to my dodge tool and just highlight under the brow a little bit from there. So when we're doing this, it normally doesn't feel like we're actually doing a lot. Sometimes it can feel like nothing's really happening. If I now turn my bottom layer off, you can see that there's actually quite a lot been drawn there. It looks a bit ridiculous when you look at it like that. But if I now turn this off and on, you can see it's made a hell of a difference. All of a sudden, we are drawn to the face and we have toned down here even more, enhancing what we did earlier in our mask, but also enhancing the lighting we did in the studio. So it is just pushing our image to the next level. Personally, it's one of my absolute favorite techniques to use because I like art. I used to do a lot of drawing. I used to do a lot of painting. So for me, it feels natural to be doing that kind of motion with the pen rather than any kind of tapping or scribbling. So I think that works quite well. Last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to slightly darken the edge of the lip here where the light has caught. ever so slightly, just so the lips are coming out of the darkness, and just this little section down there. And I'm going to slightly lighten around here. And overall, I think that's looking absolutely lovely. Perfect. So let's move on to the eyes. I'm going to zoom into the eyes. We're going to have a look, see if there's anything we need to do. I am going to remove this little blemish here, which looks like it's from potentially glasses or something going on. And I'm going to remove the squiggles in the eyes here. So I'm going to use my patch tool. Now the eyes are quite dark because of the lighting that we've used. So they're okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm creating a blank space. I am grabbing these little areas and just making that blank space bigger as I go. And that's a much cleaner eye from there. We've got the same over here. So I've got a slightly blank space down here. I'm going to build on that, keep dragging the area out, keep dragging it out until I have a nice big blank space to use. Oh, and that's a lovely error. We'll just take that out. I always find when you're working with problems, it's, sometimes just easy to solve the problem, then go backwards. Now I've got a slight texture here. We have got the texture. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate my layer and I'm going to put this layer on 50%. And I'm going to just move it over the top of itself, slightly softening it. You can also, because you're using the eye, you can choose to use a different area like that. If you want to add a different texture in, you have to make sure that that is quite a clean area, like the background. And then that is just going to soften this area a bit. And then you can choose which opacity you want it on. This eye has gone quite dark, partly with us editing it, but also the light just wasn't hitting it as well. So I'm going to bring my dodge tool on and slightly tap. We do not want the eye to go white. We are not looking for that at all. The whites of the eyes would not be white when it's a blue image. So I think that's looking quite nice. The next thing I would like to do is a skin edit, but we really do not need much. I'm just looking to soften some texture down here, soften a little bit of texture, but quite honestly, her skin is basically perfect. I'm going to use my action that you guys will have seen me use before. And, the action, of course, doesn't like being used when I have other layers. So that's just because of the way I wrote it. It's fine. So what I'm going to do, we'll just do it manually. 3 layers. The top layer, I am going to use a high pass, filter, other, high pass, and I want to turn that top layer off so I can't see it. We are going to just do it so we haven't got colour. We do not want colour. We just want enough texture. A tiny bit of colour still there. There we go. We just want the texture, and I'm going to put that on overlay. We're then going to go to our next one. We're going to go to filter, blur, and surface blur. This one can take some time. There we go. I'm going to use it on what it's on. But essentially what you want it to be is soft, but not too soft. You don't worry about these edges. We're only looking at the skin. We're then going to turn that surface blur layer down. I always start at 50% and then you choose where you want it to be. All my action did was it puts these layers in place for me. But when I wrote the action, I had a flatten all layers at the beginning because there's something I was doing. So that's why it didn't work beforehand. It didn't want to flatten. Okay, so we'll bring that in here. I'm now going to grab all 3 of these layers. So we have our high pass layer for detail. We have our surface blur layer for our softening. This bottom layer here doesn't actually do anything. I call it my backup layer. It's just there so I have the original texture in case I muck anything up. Never needed it, but worth having. So I'm going to group these, hit my mask, Control I to invert my mask, and then I'm going to start drawing on these when I actually remember where my brush is. There we go. So that is just softening the skin. It is keeping all the texture. Everything is still there. It is just softening that tone underneath. And down here is where I really want to use it. Because this area is slightly out of focus, it will have slightly more of an effect. And let's come round. Perfect. So we zoom out. And we can see that that skin has just softened a little bit. And now I can either turn down the overall opacity, or I can turn down each layer if I want the softness to be higher or lower, or if I want the high opacity to be higher or lower with the detail. I'm just going to turn the overall thing down a tiny bit. So finally, I'm going to come in and work on the eyes. So we're going to go back to our background layer, and I'm going to create an adjustments layer. So we're going to click on here and we're going to go to levels. Now the eyes are quite dark. Right now, I can't see what detail we have, but let's move our midtones up so we can see a little bit more. You can ignore this, it's because it's on the bottom layer. We're just looking at the eyes right now. I will turn them off actually, there we go. We'll make that easier. And we'll zoom into here so we can actually see Nigel in her eye. And then we're going to bring the shadows down a tiny bit more. It's going to be quite easily affected because it's a gelled image, so it's quite contrasty. And if I turn this off and on, you can see it's quite a difference. Now, using the mask layer on this, we're going to Control I again to invert and use our brush to just draw that in. We then can make a decision as to what we want to take back. So I'm going to take the black of the eye back out, and again on here we don't need to see Nigel, and if I come out you can see that the eyes are now have a glow to them. It's up to us how much we want the opacity for that. I'm not going to want it very much. I want a slight glisten to the eye, but I really don't want us to see too much detail. I think that looks quite nice. I like the longer catch light coming around there from the polyboard, I think, and from the reflector, so we're going to leave it there. Now, the last thing we need to do is I have noticed there is a little squiggle here. So I'm going to take this out. Sometimes we miss these things on our first go around. That is totally okay. This is why we double check. If you make a habit of double checking your work as you go and re-going over things, you don't ever need to worry about if you've missed anything, because you know you're going to double check it. You know you're going to catch it the next time round. And the best editors, the best photographers will sit, look at their work again and again and again, and they will make a decision as they go as to, right, is there anything else that's annoying me? Is there anything that is pulling the attention away? They will keep asking themselves that question, and it will become just second nature to ask those questions to yourself. So I'm absolutely loving this. I think that looks brilliant. Let's use our history and go all the way back and see how far we've come. It's quite different. I will show you the before and after, but I think that's a really good, really good image. I think Nigel did absolutely amazing, and I think it's elevated to quite a beautiful beauty shot of Lily, and I'm sure she'll be very pleased with it. I'll see you guys next time.